Hello and welcome back to the Do Brand You channel, where we are focused on people that are unleashing their potential in every season of life. And today I am so happy to have Kabrina here with us. So welcome, Kabrina.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and as we were just chatting before, found out, I was born where she lives and we have a lot of connections. And I think, that's always the wonderful thing about the connections that we make with people. I met Kabrina online at a networking thing, and here we are going to have a great conversation. And I'm excited for all of those of you listening to be able to share in this. So Kabrina is a former Disney trainer and cast member. She's a conversion storyteller, so I'm excited to learn more about what that is, a speaker and an author. And she's been featured by The Thing, Data Tune, ConvertKit, Interact, and MailCon. She specializes in messaging alignment for business to accelerate growth and give them a clear place to point to their teams. And her proprietary storytelling techniques help her clients to tell better stories on social, in their systems, and on stages. Aren't we all trying to do that as well? Kabrina integrates brain science and psychology and generational studies to help leaders create raving fans that come back again and again. My gosh, we have a half an hour here, Kabrina, and we just want to dive into what you do and what fuels you to do that. But can we start back in Disney? How did it all start?
So I was actually 4 years old and was watching a documentary really late at night and decided that I was going to be an Imagineer because Imagineers color in the lines. And as a 4-year-old, I was determined to work for Disney. So as I got older, I was like, I'm going to go into drawing and painting. I'm going to be the person who's creating all these different movies and telling these stories and coloring all of these different pieces and princesses and things that I was interested in as I grew up. And as an avid reader, all those stories that I was reading, I was like, oh, there's so much potential here. And what does this look like? So then I got into college, though, and realized very quickly that I was not going to be able to afford to go to school of the arts in Denver. So I basically started over and was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with my life? Because if I can't work for Disney, then, that's been my plan this whole entire time. So I started looking at different colleges and found that the dean of the business school of the college that I went to was actually creating some Disney classes. So I was like, okay, well, maybe there's still hope. So I got into a double major of business and communications with a minor in leadership studies and was like, okay, well, I'm going to get there. And my freshman year of college during January term, we went to Disneyland and I saw those name tags and I looked at him and I said, I'm going to have one of those name tags. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to figure it out. And was able to get into the college program to get my foot in the door, and then ended up training cast members for Services for Guests with Disabilities and writing all the pamphlets for Disneyland, which then were transcribed over into Disney World by their team there.
That is just so cool. What I love is that you've highlighted how you kind of found your compass, that true north, early on. And isn't it interesting when I talk to people too, sometimes when they feel lost, I always say, go back to your childhood, go back and find those things that you are really, really excited about. So I'm really interested because we talked a little bit before we started. How was that transition for you from going from sort of this kind of corporate work? Because I know now you have your own business. And how did you navigate that? Because here you kind of got to where you wanted to be. Isn't that the end? Didn't you get the finish line? So what propelled you to move in a different or in a new direction or an expanded direction?
Yeah, I thought that I had made it. And I was in my 20s. I had the job that I wanted. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And then I moved back to get married. And so moved from California back to Colorado. And very soon after my wedding, I found out I was pregnant. And so all of a sudden, I had never wanted to have children. My life started to spiral. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And then, you have that baby. They put that baby on your chest and you're like, where have you been my whole life? I have to protect you at all costs. And found out very quickly that childcare is obnoxiously expensive. And so I went on the hunt for what can I do from home? What does this look like to work remotely before it was cool to work remotely? So this was back in 2014. So I'm doing all these things. I was a photographer on the side. I started looking into courses. What does that look like? Because I had worked for Services for Guests with Disabilities, I was like, well, I'll become a sign language interpreter because that was my backup plan. So I started taking classes and starting the accreditation process for that, and then found out I was pregnant with my second. So I had to figure out, what does this look like? Still trying to finish my degree in college, and actually ended up walking across the stage 8 months pregnant with my second, because determined I was going to finish my degree. I was going to get done. I was going to check that box because I was taught growing up that having that degree was the most important thing that you could do with your life. So I didn't want to disappoint myself and all of the people around me that had said that that was what I needed to do. So when I jumped out of Disney and back into, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom for a short period of time, but we need the income, I ended up getting picked up by a company called ConvertKit that I started as a contractor and was doing their customer service for them. Very quickly, though, my marketing background and having that double major with communications came in, and people started going, well, can you do consulting? Like, would you do this for us on the side? And that opened up a whole new world for me of, oh, people pay for this kind of stuff. This is not just me going above and beyond and being kind. This is something that I could make into my own thing. Not even really thinking about owning a business per se. Like, technically as a contractor, I had a business, but in my mind, I was just an employee of one company. I wasn't looking for more clients. I wasn't trying to go the extra mile to create a brand for myself. So when that started to happen, of other people were coming to me, it opened up a whole new world of, well, what does this look like? So because I was so good at systems, I was able to take those storytelling pieces and pull them into those pieces that people hadn't really thought of. Like email back in 2014 was still fairly boring. A lot of coding went into it. And it was not what it is today with all of our drag and drop editors.
Yeah, so nice. I love this story of how you just kept walking forward. I think that visual you gave of walking across the stage, 8 months pregnant, it's like, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to keep going on. And I know a lot of people here listening are people that, yeah, they sometimes they don't want to start. They don't know where to go, so they don't do anything. And I always think opportunities are like rabbits. They just keep reproducing, but we have to kind of take those steps.
Well, and
it's so
interesting that you say that too, because even in the last several weeks, you have your own coaches and I have a counselor and things like that. And I said something in a counseling session and I was like, oh, that's why I do the things that I do in my business, because basically what I did at Disney is exactly what I'm doing for my clients now. I'm just doing it in a different capacity. Instead of doing it under a corporate umbrella, I get to go into different corporations and do it for them, as well as work with entrepreneurs, which is really, it was my first love of watching entrepreneurs have that aha moment of, oh, this is what it looks like to have a business and not be tied to my computer and move things forward. But I think when we're in the midst of all of it and we're just kind of forest through the trees feeling, we don't see the through line. And it's taken years of going to therapy, having a coach, having other people speak into me for me to go, oh, aha, the through line was there. The story was already getting prepared for me. I just didn't realize it. And there's still things that I'm like, why the heck did this happen? Why am I in this position? Why can't I do X, Y, and Z? And trying to, maneuver through those things, because there isn't, I don't think there's ever a time that we make it all the way to where we want to go. Like, there's always that next thing. We conquer one mountain and then we want to go down to the next thing. But are we stopping long enough to realize, oh, deep breath, this is how far I've come on this whole entire journey?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I love how you just kind of put all that together. And I would really like for you to kind of speak on the concept of entrepreneurs. I know that's who a lot of people who are listening, and they are kind of thinking about moving ahead, and there's a lot of hesitancy there. But in your story that you've just shared, it's kind of like these unexpected things happen. I mean, so many times life we have planned out. And then, I mean, even myself recently, all of a sudden it was like, wow, that came out of left field. And now I have to reorganize things. Okay, what's happening? How do you deal with that? And maybe even go into, how are you serving other people through these situations? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've realized is that we all have the same emotions about different things. And so, for example, this last week, I went bowling with a group of people, and, I came into it and I was like, this is really fun. And, was making strikes and knocking things down and no problem. And then there was one other person on our team this is what he does. He is a bowler. I am not a bowler. I would not give myself that title. And so then it was like, oh, there's competition. Oh, I need to be at the top of my game. And then there was pressure. And so I stood back and I was like, why do I feel this pressure? Nobody wins anything. There is no award. There is nothing tied to this. This is literally just fun. And when I came into it with that aspect, I did really, really well. And so I was like, okay, this is a familiar feeling. So how do I take this feeling of overwhelm and overthinking, because you start to have that overthinking feeling where you just feel like you're fog all over your head. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. And I started trying different things to get through the overthinking and the overwhelm. And so when it comes to how do you help people through this, it's relating back to what was that feeling. And so I have a lot of entrepreneurs that come and work with me that, they're fairly far off on their journey. They've been in this for a couple of years and they've forgotten what it was like when they started, but they're working with brand new entrepreneurs, for example. And I always say, did you keep a journal? Did you make videos? Did you make content? Go back and remind yourself, what were you feeling? What were you really thinking? What were you laying in bed that was keeping you awake, that you were talking to your spouse about? Because those are the conversations. We like to put up the highlight reel of what's going on in our lives. And sometimes it sucks. Sometimes things are not going like we want them to, and they're not being created in the way that we thought that they were going to happen. I mean, I could tell you story after story where things have been crazy. I just recently moved across the country to Nashville, and people go, well, why did you move? And I go, well, there really is no other reason besides I got divorced and I wanted a new, fresh start. And so trying to explain to people, come up with a different story, like when you hurt yourself and they're like, you got to come up with a cooler story than that. I was like, why don't I just tell you the truth so that people understand I'm still a human, you're still a human. And that's where we connect with people. That's why when you're scrolling through TikTok and you see that mom whose house is a mess, but she's still making content about her making bread because that's what she's passionate about, you're like, I like this person. Or why we'll watch people's dating stories. Because do we have any say in what they're doing in their dating life or what they're doing with them when they're making bread or starting a business? No, but we're like, oh, I wish that was me. Yeah. I can connect with that person. I understand where they're at. And we start to feel like we know them. That's why so many people feel like they know Ryan Reynolds, because he's been so many different characters and he is very authentic in his content in real life that we go, oh, I know him. We don't know anything about him. He could be a totally different person in real life. But because of the content that he's put out into the world, we've connected with him emotionally.
Yeah. I love that what you said about whatever you're doing thing, where's your journal? Did you write it down? Do you have content? Because when I work with people as well, I always, when they say like, who do I serve in my business? We work on things like that. I always say, serve who you were 5 or 10 years ago. And it's exactly what you're talking about. Like you talked about creating a business that was on exactly the same people that you were serving 5 or 10 years ago. And then you create that and that becomes your story. Yeah, I just love that. I wanted to ask you as well, like, in these moments of like, your story, I know that we talked a little before we started about how you help people with their stories. one thing is you talk about like going through hard times, divorce, or people get sick, or lose your job, or anything can happen. And you create that content. What is your advice? It's sometimes too hard to share right then. Do you package it up and then use it later, or share it then? Is that most authentic?
Yeah, so I actually have recorded tons and tons and tons of videos during really recently through my whole entire divorce process, because anybody who's been there knows that it takes a long period of time. And none of those got posted. The reason I created them was for two reasons. One, because that was my way of journaling when I just didn't have the words to say, but I could word vomit into a video what I was feeling at that moment that wouldn't have made sense on paper. So that was my way of just getting it out of me. The second reason was because I wanted to be able to go back and be like, this is what I was feeling, even though it's terrible. And at the moment, you don't want to hold those things. But the thing about stories and the difference between a highlight reel and somebody you actually relate to is the fact that somebody who you relate to in any story arc, there is a down. You cannot have a story arc without there being that down piece. And so if we know that that's part of the hero's journey, that's part of a 3-act play, that's part of any other story system that we create, we have to show those pieces. Because if it's just always hunky-dory, we're always making money, we're always taking pictures with the $13 bazillion car and plane and house, nobody can relate to that. Because now our brains are actually telling us, that's not realistic, that's not for me. And we might buy the program and just crossing our fingers and hoping that it's going to work for us. And then we still don't get the results that we want because we haven't related it and we haven't made our brains believe that it's actually possible for us.
Yeah. So what are some key kind of tips that you could give people that are, they got their business started and they're trying to share their story? Where can they share it? How do they share it? What does it look like? Anything. It's quite open, I know, but you're the storyteller.
Yeah, so podcasts are amazing. I love stages of all kinds, but especially when you're first starting out, podcasts are great to have your own, to get on other people's. A great thing to do is get on other people's podcasts that you just find that you connect with, that you're in networking groups with, and tell the story over and over and over again. When my speaking clients come to me and they're like, I've been a professor for years, or I've been in corporate and I've spoken a lot, speaking on stages by yourself, doing a talk about something is very different than having a conversation like this. But in these conversations, I can hone things that I want to try for the first time. Or if I'm like, here's this idea that I'm having and I'm trying to like manipulate it, but then you'll ask a question that I'm like, now it makes sense. Then I can try it here and it's recorded so I can go back and go, no, that didn't come out like I wanted it to. Or, hey, how can I take that same idea and say it again? Like I'll go back and listen to old podcasts that I've been on and that I've recorded myself and go, hey, I needed to hear that today. Or why am I not talking about that piece more? Because that was really impactful. And you might be, sometimes we literally need to preach to the choir that is us, which is another reason just to record your own content.
Exactly. I love that. So, I always say that conversations create collective wisdom. And it's, I'm sort of addicted to these interview podcasts because I just love what comes out of it. I mean, so many times I finish I've now cut it down to just 30 minutes, but it come out and I'm like, oh my gosh. And like you say, it's not just what the other person says. In conversations, it's where we kind of get those aha moments. Yeah.
Well, and
so I know you have a podcast. Can you kind of share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say about that. I use Riverside as well. So if you're not familiar, riverside.fm is what both Lorraine and I use. And the best thing you can do is now that I've got a podcast, I can cut that content down into smaller pieces. It can be a YouTube video. It can be my reels. It can be a TikTok video. And now I've created all this content from one piece of giant content, and then I can use AI to transcribe this content and write a blog post for myself. So it's really easy to start to get yourself out there now that there's not as much manual labor on it. But my podcast,
there's not manual labor.
Yeah.
So
But my
I
podcast is
love it.
called Top Shelf Creator. It's for entrepreneurs and creators that are trying to create a sustainable and scalable online business doing what they love. And the reason that I
Mm,
started it was because I had so many people coming to me who either called themselves entrepreneur and didn't believe that they were creative and they couldn't create things. And so content was really difficult for them, as well as my creator clients who were like, I'm not an entrepreneur. This is not a real business, but I'm making money with it. And I've quit my job because I've made enough money to not work. And I was like, well, that's the definition of a business. And watching people flounder. And I was sick of seeing the starving artist keep starving.
yeah. 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 I love that. So with your podcast, is it just you speaking or do you do interviews
I
as
do
well?
interviews as well. So I do about half and half because there's always some times when you're like, oh, there's this thing that I need to get on my soapbox about because I've had 6 clients ask me about it this week. And I just keep a running list of those. And then I also curate these different people that are all over the world that are just
Yeah.
geniuses in what they do, because I ran a marketing agency for years and people would come to me all the time
Yeah.
and be like, here's my business, fix it because you're a marketer. And I was like, that's not what I do. I don't do all of the things a marketer does. I do this select group. And so what I've realized is that there's no one person who's going to be able to fix all of your problems. So if I can collect the best people in the world that fix problems, then I have a Rolodex of humans that I can say, hey, Lorraine does this. You should go to her for that.
Yeah.
Justin does this.
Yeah.
You should go to him for that. And then I don't have all the pressure
Yeah.
of, oh, well, who do you suggest for that? Because I just go, hey, what one of my friends that I've hung out with and had a conversation with can I send that person to?
Yeah. I love that. That's the one thing I see that what we do, I mean, podcast interviewing is a collaborative nature. What we do when we have conversations is we take time, we invest time in somebody else and we get these connections. And it is like you, just like finding that Rolodex of people that you can, just pass on to, and you can really niche down into your business. So I really want to get into this because I want to look forward. I want to look forward to what's coming up. I think, 2020 to me kind of shifted everybody around and threw us up, down, and we all kind of fell down and we found our place. And then to me, this year with AI coming in really strong, a lot of people adapting to it. One of the things I find kind of anxious, stressful, because every time I open an email, the platforms, the products I'm using are upgrading, they're upgrading. And I'm trying to find my true north. I'm trying to move forward in that. Where do you see content going with AI? How can we really, find the success in this, what's moving forward today?
This has been the number one concern that my clients have had recently is what's going to happen? Is AI going to replace me? Is this going to be the thing that ruins online business because people can create a course by pressing a couple of buttons and having some stupid idea about how to garden one specific kind of plant, and then AI pulls all the information from all over the internet? Yes, that is possible. The problem is that it's never going to be as good as a human. The reason being is because AI does not connect that emotional piece. And so I really do think that live stages are going to become a giant piece of people's businesses moving forward, because we're getting to the point where now that we have all the masking and things that you can do, even on Zoom, where they're starting to create things where you can be a totally different person and look like a real human on a video call. That to me is where things start to get a little bit hairy, scary, because who do I know is real? And so that raw content of, like I was saying, that mom making bread in her kitchen that's a mess, that's going to be the things that we want to see, because AI is not built for the mess. AI is built for picture perfect, squared off, quality things. It's not that art piece at the art museum where you're like, my child could have made that, because it's just messy and out there. But that's what we're going to be wanting to see, because we're going to want that authenticity. They've actually done studies on millennials and Gen Z saying that the buying cycle is taking much longer, one, because of this AI piece and the fact that people don't believe you. So we're having to see it more times. and they just want authenticity and transparency. And so if we know that, we're seeing, they always do it on the newest generation because that's the cool thing to do. But if we're all honest, Gen Z doesn't really have any buying power. So we're going to take that we're going to put a pin in that. And we're going to say, okay, well, we know that the millennials have a lot of buying power. We know that Gen X and boomers have buying power. So if we know that millennials, which is one of the biggest generations, has all of these things about transparency, then why not, as you, figure out how you can be? Like, how obnoxious can you be? I love the word obnoxious. Everybody hates it in my circles. But how crazy can you be? How out there can you be? Does that mean showing that you have yellow glasses? Like in my community, I've started being known as the girl with the yellow glasses. What are you doing to get out in front of people? Doing the things that you would do with your friends while you sit at dinner. Like, what kind of conversations are you having? What kind of harebrained schemes are you coming up with? Because that's where innovation comes from. And AI can't keep up with innovation because it's always going to be behind.
Exactly. I love that. So we are going to be wrapping up. And I think what would be a really wonderful way to wrap this up is just, can you share, what's your daily and weekly life like for you to create content, to put it out there? Where are you putting it? Maybe why do you put it there? And what does that look like for you? And also, it gives the audience a chance to connect with you in each of these places.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number one platform, because I work with a lot of corporations, is LinkedIn. So I post at least once a day there, and that's where I'm hanging out and really having conversations with people in those threads. So if I see a piece of content that piques my interest, I'm going to go comment on that, because I've done months and months and months of watching how this works. And I get more followers and people in my DMs from the comments that I leave on other people's content than I ever do on my own content. It always is crazy to me. And I've taken a couple weeks off from it because I was speaking at a conference, and I can see the decline because I'm not communicating with my community. And so when I stop communicating, it's like when you don't call your mom for a couple of weeks. They start to go, are you still there? Are you alive? Because we don't know, because we can't see people on the internet as we are, because there's so much scheduling. So LinkedIn, love that place. I also love TikTok. I know a lot of people hate TikTok, but the beauty of it is, and how I run my weeks, is I create content on TikTok, and then I can pull it through a system called SnapTik, take the branding off, and now I've got a video that I can put on Reels, I can put it on YouTube Shorts, I can put it onto LinkedIn. And if people like it there, great. That gives me some information. I view everything that I do in my marketing and in my messaging as an experiment. So if I have something cool that I want to try, I just stick it out there. And, if it flops, nobody saw it. Nobody's going to remember.
Yeah, I love that. And do you find things like, LinkedIn is considered, definitely a great space for, I would say people in their 30s, 40s and onward, older as well. TikTok, is it generational, or is it open to any
So we're actually starting to see a lot of influencers who are in their late 60s, early 70s, and even 80s working with brands that are specific to that age group, because people will tell you, my demographic's not on TikTok, my demographic's not on LinkedIn. I have met the craziest people on different platforms because of the fact that your demographic is everywhere. It just depends on where you decide to be. If you hate TikTok, don't do TikTok. If you hate LinkedIn, don't do it. But find where your people are living. Where are they hanging out? Like, if I know that my friends hang out at the bar down the street, I'm going to go pop in. Even if I don't necessarily like the bar, I'm going to just pop my head in and see what it's about. But then if I know that my other people are hanging out at Hobby Lobby, and I'm like, hey, I'm here for this and I'm going to spend way too much money while I'm here, I'm going to make a seat and make myself my own little corner there.
Yeah, that's right. That is so cool. Well, you know what? The 30 minutes is already up. And I'm so glad that you have come to invest your time into this conversation, and to give your time, I should say. And it's been wonderful. So thank you so much, Kabrina. Can you share how people can get in touch with you and what you can do for them. And I'll put everything in the show notes, but anything that you'd like to share along that line?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're trying to work on your messaging and really get your story honed in so that you can start converting people, I have a free mini course at micdropmessage.com. And then you can connect with me on any platform. I am at Kabrina Ashley everywhere.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, we'll do that. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's so inspiring. And it's been wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.